All these countries who vote against the African countries at CITES, they will be the cause of the extinction of rhino.
I'm Annette Oelofse. I'm a born Namibian and this is my home. I'm from Mount Etjo, built up Mount Etjo together with my husband, and this is my life, my way of life, and with that came the conservation for rhinos and the raising of orphaned rhinos. So the very first rhino that I received was a black rhino, and she was a heifer, and she was only 7 days old. The vets brought her in and they said to me, there's a 10% living chance. And to me it was, you know, where there's life, there's hope. And by miracle, she did it. We pulled her through. Today, she's 28 years old. She's got 10 calves. She's pregnant with her 11th calf. And it just goes to show when you save one, you can put so many more back into nature again. And it's sad when they poach a cow, they usually take 2 lives because either she's pregnant or she has got a tiny little calf which is going to perish if we don't find it in time. And the black rhino are not easily found because they live in, usually the habitat is very thick of bush, and if a cow is poached, you know, often you don't find the incidences and those little calves just perish out there.
My name is Alex Oelofse. My family and I run and manage the Okonyati Private Game Reserve, on which we have Mount Etjo Safari Lodge, and also run a Rhino Orphanage under the Mount Etjo Rhino Trust. I'm going to talk to you today about rhino poaching in general and the problem of poaching in Africa, where it comes from and for how long it's been going on. Poaching in Africa has been happening for roughly the last century. In the 70s, the CITES Convention banned the trade in ivory and rhino horn. For the people who don't know, CITES is the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species. In the 1950s, we had about 100,000 black rhino in Africa. Today, we have roughly over 5,000. That means we've lost 95,000 black rhino in a space of 70 years. That means we've been losing more than 1,000 rhinos a year. And even with the ban on the trade in rhino horn, rhino poachings just kept going. Statistics for the last 70 years just show one way, and unfortunately that shows that in the next 15 to 20 years, we won't have any wild rhino anymore. Poaching really hit the media when it became bad in South Africa in 2010. In 2010, there were roughly about 20,000 rhino in Southern Africa, black and white rhino combined. Now we sit with roughly 13,000 white rhino and just about 5,000 black rhino. Kruger National Park, which according to their statistics in 2010 had 11,000 rhino, now unofficially due to counts they have about 700 rhino. And this just shows that it's not stopping. The ban on trade in horn, anti-poaching efforts to educate the users of horn, it's not stopping the poaching. We just keep going in one direction.
In the beginning, when my journey started with orphaned rhinos, it was like rhinos from sick mothers that had died or succumbed to illness or old age. So we had just few rhino calves coming in, and we nurtured them, and we brought them up back and released them back into the wilderness. But lately, the poaching has increased dramatically. First, South Africa was hit, and now for the last 2 years after COVID, Namibia has been hit very hard. So our orphans coming to the orphanages, from where we just had 1 or 2 at a time, have increased to 5 or 6 at a time. And it is just such a tragic event that we have to take care of orphans from poached animals. Because I raised my orphans since 1995, the country knows that if there are any poaching cases and there's calves involved, then they bring them to us at Mount Etjo and we raise the orphans. Some of them come in very dehydrated, very malnourished, because you find the carcass is being found just days later after poaching, and so it's always it's a challenge to save every little calf that is coming in, depending on the trauma they have experienced with the poachers hacking away on their mothers. They're very protective over the mothers, so some of them get even shot because they do charge the poachers and the poachers don't want them in the way. Some of them we receive with bullet wounds, some of them we can save, some of them are very dehydrated, and it's my challenge to get them, first of all, trust me as a human again, to break that barrier, and then also to get them back to a healthy little calf that they can survive. Some of them we do get over that barrier and they do survive, but only like 2 months later they still die of complications because of the dehydration. The organs have had damage and unfortunately we lose them later on as well. That is what I am here for. It's my passion. It's my sometimes it is such a harsh emotional roller coaster that when I'm going through it and when I'm with that little orphan, that I sometimes feel, can I do this again? But when that orphan, the new one, comes to my doorstep, I just take it in, and I just look forward to those rewards when we release them again.
Why is poaching such a big problem? And with everything in our modern day world, it's all about money. So rhino horn on the black market is worth a lot. The raw horn is worth about 60,000 US per kilo. And that's just for the raw horn on the black market in Vietnam. The Asian market is the biggest market in rhino horn, so a lot of it goes to Vietnam, and from Vietnam it then gets smuggled back into China. So China publicly is very much against the use of rhino horn, and that's why the pathway always goes through Vietnam. So the raw horn in Vietnam is worth about 60,000 US a kilo, and then it gets worked. So the media has made it to be that rhino horn gets used for mostly medicinal purposes, but actually in reality it's more of a status symbol. Because of its high value, people with a lot of money can buy it and show off to their friends. So once the horn gets worked, people, they make libation bowls out of it, they make jewelry out of it, dagger handles. So the average sales price of the worked product is roughly 180,000 US dollars per kilo. That's 90,000 US per pound. And at that price, there's no way poaching will ever stop. You can buy a live rhino breeding cow now on the market for about roughly 10,000 US. However, the horn off of a big rhino is worth 350 to 400,000 US. So that means the dead rhino is worth 40 times what the live rhino is. And that's why they're being wiped out. So what are the solutions? How can we stop this? Well, we've tried anti-poaching efforts. Kruger Park probably has the best anti-poaching team in the world. They have 4 full-time helicopters. They have dogs who jump out of helicopters with parachutes to chase poachers. It's a full-on war there, and yet they keep losing rhino. They've tried educating the users. Jackie Chan and Yao Ming, the famous basketball player, they've had a huge campaign to try and stop users from using rhino horn. And some argue that actually made the use worse, because now people were saying, well, these famous actors or famous stars say, we can't use this, I want to show my friends that I can get it. In my opinion, the only way that we're going to save rhino, and the only way that we're going to change this, is by legalizing the trade in rhino horn. Many people don't know that you can actually cut the horn off of a rhino without hurting the rhino at all. The horn is made of keratin, just like your fingernail. And just like your fingernail, you can trim it, cut it off, and it actually grows back. So rhino horn grows back with about 2 pounds a year, about 4 inches a year that it grows back. And a lot of places are dehorning their rhino now to try and prevent poaching. But you can't cut down too low, otherwise you cut into the nerve and you hurt the rhino, which you don't want to do. So you're still always left with about 2 pounds of horn on a rhino, even after a fresh trimming or a fresh dehorning. And even just for that little part, poachers will shoot a rhino. So why not use the horn that comes off of dehorned rhino, legalize the trade, put that horn on the market and saturate the market, and keep the rhinos alive instead of having them shot by poachers? And even if we just use the horn that's in storage, just in southern Africa, in storage, we have about 40 tons of rhino horn. That equates to about 8,000 rhinos worth. That means we can, at the current use, sustain the market for 8 years without touching a live rhino. So why not legalize the trade if it's such a logical option? Well, everything when it comes to the trade in rhino horn is governed by CITES. One of the strangest things is that according to CITES and with all the right permits and fully legal, you can export a live rhino to Vietnam or China from Africa. And you can export a rhino that was hunted as a trophy with the horn. However, you cannot export just the horn. And you ask yourself, why not just change it? Well, the problem is when it comes to CITES, CITES is a convention, and there are 183 countries that are signatories to CITES. And then the European Union gets 1 vote as well. So there are 184 votes at CITES. And whenever an application gets put in for something to be changed at CITES, all those countries need to vote. And unfortunately, only 11 of those 183 countries actually have rhino. And only 2 of those countries have the majority of rhinos still alive in the world. And yet each and every one of those countries get a vote. And every time countries such as Namibia, Eswatini, South Africa, Zimbabwe go to CITES with applications on legalizing any trade, they are just outvoted by all the other signatories to CITES. And the shame is that most of these countries voting against these applications, they don't take the time to inform themselves and educate themselves about the problems. Some of these people don't even know that rhino horn grows back when you cut it off. So to me, you can't blame the poacher on the ground for poaching a rhino. You look at Africa, sit with the average unemployment of around 40%. And people are just trying to feed their families. Can you really blame the user? You look at China, it's 350 million people just in the middle class, people with money to spend, and yet they're cut off from the rest of the world. They can't get on the internet the way we can. They don't know what's happening here. So can you really blame the end user who've been using rhino horn in their culture for the last 3,000 years? There's texts where they have depicted rhino horn about 2,500 years ago, used in Chinese culture. So you can't really blame them. But to me, there is a certain part of the world that you can blame, and that's all the Western leadership in this world. The leadership of Europe, the leadership of the US, all these countries who vote against the African countries at CITES, who don't take the time to educate themselves to our problems, who don't take the time to listen to people on the ground, to what solutions we have. They will be the cause of the extinction of rhino.